Welcome everybody to IPDAE's webinar Wednesday. The topic for today, we'll be talking about leveraging blended learning in adult ed post-COVID with AEFLA grants. We're really excited to be here with you today. My name is Kelly Montesteoca. I'm Chief Learning Officer for BloomBoard, and I'm being joined today by Kristen Uvares, who is our Director of Proposals and Legal Affairs, and Ronald Cruz, who is a coordinator with Hillsborough Public Schools. I'm really happy to be here and share this information with you, and glad to have Kristen and Ronald along for the ride. So just a few housekeeping issues, some things to remember. If you have a question, please type it into the Q&A option up on your top bar. We'll be stopping intermittently throughout the presentation today to have you answer questions. If you have technical questions, please put them in here and they can be answered as we're going along. Your attendee microphones are muted, and so you're in listen-only mode. So your communication option is that Q&A feature, so please take advantage of it if you have questions. Our presentation today is being recorded. It will be archived and available on the IPDAE website within 48 hours. So let's get started. A little bit about BloomBoard. We've been around for over 10 years and have been working with state level and large district implementation work during that time. We have the real honor to be backed by some really amazing investors and advisors, including the Gates Foundation, Dell & Jobs Family Foundation, Emerson Collective, and Learn Capital. These people are investing directly into the work we've done over the years. And in addition to that, we have some pretty amazing board members that have helped us guide us along the way on our journey. We have Joanne Weiss, who was the Chief of Staff for Arnie Duncan. And we have Tom Vander Ark, who really started the education work at the Gates Foundation. And these folks have been really helping us all along the way, giving us advice, pushing, really making us think about how we're doing this transformational work across the nation. We spent the better part of the last 5 years helping states, districts, and policymakers make the shift from traditional seat time professional development and traditional degrees to more of a competency-based certification and career advancement using micro-credentials. So, for years, I am a teacher, a principal, superintendent of schools before I came to BloomBoard, and was very, very proud of the professional development I had done in my organizations. But at the end of the day, people came in, they spent their time, they signed off their sheet, they recorded their hours, and they went back to their classroom. We here at BloomBoard are really working to go beyond that, really good PD, and ensure that teachers are proving and building portfolios of evidence through a job-embedded approach in their classroom. And that's what we're going to be talking with you about today. Just a very quick look at BloomBoard's national micro-credentialing landscape. We have started the work. This is really also an evolution, not only just to see the breadth of the folks we work with. We're working with districts and states all across the country. This is really a higher level picture of how of our engagement with districts and large implementations. And so we started this work, you can see the orange, working on teacher licensure pathways and certification in places like Arkansas, North Carolina, Alabama, and Texas. And then we moved into some more focused work around master teacher pathways and content specific endorsements. So we've done a lot of work in computer science, as you can see in Arizona and in South Carolina, ESL endorsements, work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we're moving into sort of smaller certifications that have been blessed by states. And then we've worked more into this evolution of salary advancement. So we've done some work in Kentucky around rank changes. Teachers can get salary schedule advancements on that through the work we're doing there. Wisconsin has moved towards competency-based salary scales. And these stars we're particularly pleased about and proud about. We're moving into some partnerships with universities to do alternative masters of ed and actual competency master's degree in education. The idea is that eventually in the green, we'll move into the same kind of advancements and degrees in leadership. So you'll see in states like Illinois and Louisiana, we've been doing some work around principal licensure and leadership for equity and SEL. In Charlotte, Mecklenburg, we're moving into, again, more advanced roles that are moving towards salary advancement. And lastly, we're doing a lot of work in Minnesota and Florida around CTE work and workforce development pathways, which is really what's led us to some of our partnerships with IPDAE. And we'll be talking about that today, particularly our work around blended learning for adults and how they've been using that. It's been piloted in Hillsborough, and that's what Ron's here to talk to you about today. So we really have 4 things on our agenda for the day. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of the blended learning and workforce integration micro endorsements that we are encouraging folks to use here in Florida. We'll do a little background information about what is a micro credential and how it's kind of different from traditional PD. We'll spend some time with Ron talking about the Hillsborough feedback on the adult education pilot for blended learning that we've done there. And then we'll hand it over to Christian to help you think about how we can support you. And I know there's going to be lots of supports along the way if you're interested in applying for the AEFLA grant writing process. So let's dig right in. Let's talk about the overview of blended learning and workforce integration micro endorsements. So there's new FLDOE strategic priorities around this work in the work of transforming Florida's adult education system. And those are guided by the following strategic priorities. There's 4. The first is to promote regional partnerships in order to ensure comprehensive approaches that result in, we're going to bold this, improved learner outcomes. So we want these partnerships to really focus on this end result of improved learner outcomes. We want to extend the state's talent pipeline through a system and attainment of credentials of value, acquisition of post-secondary certificate, industry recognized credentials and degrees. In addition, we want to make sure that all learners are receiving high quality instruction that is prioritizing measurable labor market needs and outcomes. And in addition, in parallel, working to eliminate equity and achievement gaps in the community. And lastly, the priority 4, we want to incent, measure, and support enhanced program effectiveness. BloomBoard is really excited to be partnering in this work. We've done a lot of work across the country, but we'll be publishing some research soon around efficacy data and micro-credentials. We've been working with Harmony Public Schools in Texas through a couple of federal grants over the last few years. And we've been able to gather 2 years of efficacy data that shows very, very clearly that when teachers are completing micro-credentials, and in particular, larger sets of micro-credentials called micro-endorsements, which we'll talk about a little later in the presentation, they had increased T-test scores. So in Texas, T-test is the teacher evaluation and effectiveness score. And so we've been seeing that we are getting that improved impact on quality instruction. And we've seen increased MAP scores for students. And so we're also seeing that that quality instruction is yielding improved impacts on students. And as we sort of begin to push this out and look at this, we can begin also to get program efficacy data. So we're really excited about expanding that work here and partnering with you in Florida to do that. There are 2 areas in which we will do this work in Florida. The first is through a micro endorsement called Foundations of Blended Learning in Adult Education. And again, Ronald will tell you a little bit more about this. This is what we've been piloting in Hillsborough. And so you'll see that there are 3 micro credentials in this micro endorsement: building relationships with individual students in a blended environment, designing a weekly blended learning arc, and establishing norms for engagement for blended environments. And so we'll get in and talk a little bit more about what does it mean that this little hexagon is a micro credential, and what does that look like for teachers? And then the second area that we're going to be pushing in on is foundations of integrating workforce skills. And so you'll see here how we're working with teachers to elevate those workforce skills in adult education, integrate those workforce skills into current curriculum, and then assess the demonstration of employability skills in their classrooms. All right, so let's go on and talk a little bit about what a micro-credential actually is. And there's a great analogy that we use that really helps us think about kind of traditional versus more competency-based learning by doing methodologies. So let's go with a very basic survival skill. You're going to build a fire. So my heart would start beating if I knew I need to take my children or a group of people out in the wild. I'm more of a glamper, but let's say I had 2 options for training. So I could go to my REI super camp store. They're having a course there on how to build a fire. I get some reading material up front. They may talk to me in the class about, different kinds of kindling and how you set up the wood. And then, once they've sort of demonstrated that, we might take a written exam, or they'll give us a quiz or reflection about what kind of kindle is the best, like what are the steps in which you build the fire. But the concern about this is that I'm about to go in the woods and I've actually never built the fire. I might have my certificate from REI saying that I can build that fire, but I actually haven't had to demonstrate it. So we don't really know whether I can bridge that gap from this knowledge that I gained, and even my output of being able to answer traditional kind of questions or reflect with the professor. The other, and this is really, what really traditional PD is that teachers have been going through for a long time, where they are the sit and get, their compliance, they have to mark down their hours, they're checking their attendance sheets. What if we looked at it a little differently and we looked at it in a learning by doing model? This to me is kind of, I was a Girl Scout, a Brownie, a Girl Scout, my brother was a Boy Scout. This is sort of the learning by doing model, right? So we still feel like it's important to build knowledge. So I may still get those same little handbooks. I may have, my Cub Scout master talk about, how airflow impacts fire from, taking, from its flammability, from when it's a little spark all the way to its full state. But at some point, they're going to pull out actually kindling, matches, and firewood and say, okay, now show me how. We're out, camping. It's now time, before I get my badge, before I'm certified to do that, I actually have to try it. So I take my tools, I sit with my Cub Scout master and my peers, and I actually build a bunch of fires. I get feedback, I figure out where I'm going wrong, I figure out how to be more efficacious in this process. This is really the learning by doing methodology. And if you had to pick which model you were going to use, if you had to survive a night in the wood and build a fire, we've gotten a lot of feedback that it's probably this learning by doing. I want someone standing by me to help support me to actually do the thing that I need to do before it's really high stakes. So what this looks like from the micro-credentialing and from the BloomBoard perspective is that we are shifting that traditional professional learning model where we're all gathering in the library to have a PD. On a PD day, we've got stuff we read, we've got stuff in workshop that we do with other teachers, and then we take a reflection, but then it ends. It's not necessarily, we're not, we get back to our classroom, kids happen, instruction happens, and that transition, that translation, that bridge to practice doesn't always occur. In the BloomBoard model, the learning by doing model, we still believe it's really important to have foundational knowledge, and we'll show you what that looks like. But we also are providing in our micro-credentials the tools, the templates, the exemplars of what these artifacts look like. And then we have a coach sitting with you where you're actually doing the things that you need to do for your micro-credential in practice in your classroom, and you're getting feedback. You're accessing that coach as you need it. You have peers and cohorts. You're practicing, going through that practice revision cycle until you really feel that you've met your competency indicators and you're ready to prove your practice. So we've been using this, we've talked about the shift from traditional learning by doing. The micro-credential itself really is the thing that codifies that practice. It's the defining mechanism that helps the learner know what they have to produce to prove competency. So let's really get in and hone in and define a micro-credential. This micro-credential is that digital form of micro-certification that the learner earns when they've demonstrated a competency in a very specific skill, a bite-sized skill, via a portfolio of artifacts. And again, from classroom practice. Anytime we have educators earning micro-credentials, these are things, the portfolio of evidence, it's almost like a performance assessment that they are demonstrating in their classroom with their kids. And the key components of a micro-credential, there will always be a description of the skill. You'll always have a requirements for proving those competencies, and that's an artifact or a portfolio of evidence, a set of artifacts. And then every micro-credential will help the learner know that they've met the bar for that artifact, because it will be accompanied by a performance rubric that gives very clear requirements that you have to meet before you submit. So a micro-credential really is less like a course. When we think about college course, they're time-based. Micro-credentials are not. You can start a micro-credential, and based on how much knowledge you're going into it with, you can move as quickly as you need to. It does not require a scope and sequence. nor does it require that you actually complete a set number of learning activities like you would in a course. You're not, all you're turning in is that final portfolio of evidence. However much learning it takes, that's your personalized path. No seat time is required, like a PD workshop doesn't require travel or substitution, it's all online. And so there's a reduced expense associated with this. And then again, it's not like a test or a traditional assessment where you're passing an exam by answering some questions. It is not the output of knowledge necessarily, it's the application of knowledge in a more of a performance test, more like a driver's license. So I have 3 kids. They all took very different paths before they took their driver's license. We had one that we sent to a driver's school because we didn't want to do it. We took one of them down to the high school parking lot and drove around, and the other one was some mix of both. But at the end of the day, they all 3 had to walk into the DMV and get in behind the wheel with a gentleman with a clipboard, and they were assessed on a certain number of criteria. And when they drove back in the DMV, they either passed or they didn't pass yet, and they were given feedback on what parts you need to work on your 3-point turn. You need to stop doing that California rolling stop through the stop sign. And then they have a chance to come back and have another shot on goal to earn their driver's license after they've done more practice. So in essence, a micro-credential is like that pole vault. The bar is set, and there's different learning and practice needs for different learners in order to clear that same bar. In essence, it's a single version of a familiar portfolio-based education certification like National Board does, and it allows practitioners to distinguish themselves as accomplished via their practice, not an exam. So what's a micro-endorsement? A micro-endorsement is really important. If we go back to that Harmony research, a single micro-credential, yes, it allows a teacher to prove a skill, but it may not have an overall impact on a student's achievement because it's one skill. Where we begin to get impact are when we have educators earn entire micro-endorsements. And a micro-endorsement is a set of micro-credentials that are put together because they are rooted in research on good practice, and they represent the breadth and the depth of demonstrated skills in a topic. We are right now, and you saw on our map in Louisiana, we're using micro-endorsements as replacements for certain certifications like Praxis. So in Louisiana, you don't have to take the Praxis. You can earn a set of micro-credentials, a micro-endorsement, in order to achieve that certificate. So let's get into what this actually looks like for the educator. When we think through the Learn by Doing model here at BloomBoard, there's really 2 phases. You'll see the learning broken out and the doing. So all of our micro-credentials follow this model, these 5 steps. The first thing an educator does is when they get into the micro-credential, they have an opportunity to explore and engage. They orient themselves to the micro-credential and what they'll be doing. It's sort of like, what's my target? And then they take a self-assessment and engage in filling in their knowledge gaps. Some educators come in doing micro-credentials and they're veteran teachers. They don't have a lot of knowledge gaps to fill. And so this engage part in BloomBoard is really a personalized path. So let's take a quick look in the platform and see what that looks like. When you go into any micro-credentials, this is building relationships with adult learners in a blended environment. You land on this Explore page. The Explore page, again, orients you as the learner to what you're going to be doing. So you have your the skills, like what will you be doing and demonstrating as a learner in this micro-credential. In this case, building relationships. You're going to establish one-on-one relationships through a coaching and mentoring rapport. You're going to communicate, you're going to develop a communication and feedback process that ensures that you have quality interactions with students. You're going to share about yourself to establish a human connection with your students. And lastly, you're going to demonstrate unconditional positive regard and support and acceptance of all students. So these are sort of the high level pieces that are pulled from research. And here is how you're going to do this. This is your portfolio of evidence. So in this portfolio, you'll see there are 4 actual artifacts. You're going to do a survey and compile those results pre and post, measuring your teacher-student relationships. You're going to create learner profiles for 2 selected students in one of your courses. You're going to create a video, which is introducing yourself to your students. And then you're going to do a video or audio recording of a one-on-one check-in with one of the students from your learner profiles. And so this is your one-stop shop to kind of see what is my target? What am I doing? On the bottom, you'll see that there's research about these demonstrated outcomes. It's kind of the why. Why are you doing this competency? And there's vocabulary and some high-level activities that can help you get oriented to the competency itself. When you move into engage, you have the ability as a learner to complete a readiness check. So you're clicking questions. These questions are related back to the artifacts and those demonstrated outcomes. And so at the end, you will get a prescribed diagnostic for you as a learner around which of these activities you should do. Are there ones you should review based on your self-assessment? Are there ones you really, really need to do before you start building your artifacts? But your path here in Engage, the learning path, unlike a course where each one of these 6 activities would be required to be done by a certain time, you decide which of these pieces need to be done as a learner to fill your gaps before you're ready to build a portfolio of evidence that will allow you to earn this micro-credential. You're able to share your activities with other people in your cohort. You're able to check answers, so you're getting some feedback along the way, whether your learning is moving in the right direction. And so this is very much like what traditional PD looks like, with the exception that you are able to kind of prescribe your own learning path when you are going through the activities. Where we diverge is when we think about this third step. So learning by doing, this is where PD typically stops, right? We are really focusing our work on this third piece. This third piece is where you think through building your actual portfolio. It's where you get to practice. It's where you get to receive feedback from peers. It's where you get to receive feedback from your coaches. You're getting supported. We'll talk about how we support educators through some learning community work. And so you're able to talk about things, you can practice, you can recreate artifacts. And when you're ready, you submit that portfolio. So you're saying, hey, I am actually vulnerable enough to share my classroom practice. I'm sending it off to a third-party educator. As you imagine, this is a difficult thing if people have been engaged in traditional PD. Videoing yourself and sending it off to somebody, the black box of the internet feels very risky, but it's super rewarding when you begin to see the impacts on your practice. And so once you submit that portfolio of evidence, we have third-party certified assessors that go through and score each artifact based on the competency indicators provided. They turn that portfolio back to the learner, and you've either earned it or you have not yet earned it. Either way, you get very quality feedback from your assessors, not only on which competency indicators you've met, but they're giving you qualitative narrative feedback as well for each of your artifacts. If you haven't met it yet, then you go back into the loop. You get to maybe dip back into some of the learning at the engage phase. You get to practice some more with your coach and your peers, and then you get to resubmit. And when you finally earned, there's an opportunity to look at some extension opportunities around this competency. How might you support other people in their learning? And so the way this looks in the platform is we've gone through our learning activities that we think we need. And in exercise, you'll see this is where you actually get the step-by-step instructions on how to build each of the artifacts in your portfolio. If there's a template, it's given to you. In this case, we give you the actual student survey of teacher-student relationships. You give it at the beginning. After 4 to 6 weeks, you give it again. You compile your results in this template. And once you're done, you have the ability to upload it here. Directly to the right, we talked about this being a pole vault, the bar. This is your bar over here. You have very clear kind of pre-assessment checks that are more about the quality of the artifact, like both your surveys are done, you've used the templates, your video is clear. And then there's a set of competency indicators that give you specific directions about what must be included in your artifact for you to earn. And so you can see they go down. Sometimes we ask people to annotate their artifacts and make their thinking transparent about the decisions they made while creating these artifacts. But all of these things, once you're done, you send it to your portfolio, you submit, and as I said, you then get back that evidence, whether you've earned your certification or whether you've not yet earned, and you'll need to like do a little more work before you submit. So this is a pretty high stakes way of learning, and teachers need some support as they go through and do this. So we have a very strong implementation framework that we use to support educators to help them get over that, particularly that first hump of earning their first micro-credential. If your traditional PD experience has been sitting in an auditorium and listening, even if you're the best teacher with the best intentions, now having to build an actual portfolio or practice feels very high stakes. So for all of our first-time BloomBoard participants, we have a BloomBoard Success Academy. It goes over a period of 4 to 6 weeks. That's where they get introduced to their coach. We have some pre-orientation activities occasionally to get you into the platform and familiarize. You have an orientation that outlines your program. And then we move into these BloomBoard learning community sessions. And basically what that does is we're spending time each week over a period of 3 or 4 weeks, walking you through building your artifacts, putting you into breakout groups based on which artifacts you want to use. You have face-to-face kind of supports and moving through the platform and how to navigate the platform. And that's your first micro-credential. The goal is for you really to submit your first micro-credential at the end of that 4 to 6 weeks. If you earn, that's awesome. Then you move on to your next micro-credentials in your micro-endorsement, and you're able to kind of personalize your path on the right-hand side by either continuing in synchronous meetings or just working strategically with your coach one-on-one, or attending specific workshops, or getting access to some of our self-serve support site options. And so you're really going through this process 3 times with heavy supports in your first micro-credential. So before I hand it over to Ron so we can talk about what this looked like in Hillsborough, this is kind of an overview of what the folks did in Hillsborough. They did these 3 micro-credentials. So these are the Designing a Weekly Blended Learning Arc with adult learners. So these are all focused on adult learners. You'll see in the first one, there are 4 artifacts. And then on the right-hand side are the supports in that support structure. So they had a meeting where they focused on their instructional model planning template. The first time they dug into it, they had a second meeting where they focused on a couple artifacts. And then subsequent meetings were much more differentiated based on which artifact you were working on, what kind of support you needed, whether you wanted to talk about learning and engage activities with folks. And you'll see that this process continues with each micro-credential. Second one has 4 artifacts and they had 3 meetings. The third one, Establishing Norms, has 3 artifacts, and they went through that same kind of focus process of the support framework. So I'm sure that's a lot. Before I hand it over to Ron, are there questions that about what a micro-credential is, about anything we talked about around micro-endorsements and our support framework? If so, you can put it in the Q&A. I'll pause for a second, let you guys, it's a little bit like drinking from a fire hose. So I'll give you a second just to take that in. All right, I'm not seeing any questions in Q&A, but if you think of something as we proceed, please go ahead and put that in and we can either answer them directly or have a quick little Q&A wrap up at the end of the session. So Rana, we'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. My name is Ron Cruz. Probably you're familiar with me. I'm from Hillsborough County. Just to give you a little bit of a perspective here, just so you know, if you're thinking about moving into this direction, first of all, I am not an employee of BloomBoard. Second of all, I am not getting paid by BloomBoard to say what I'm saying. However, I am part of BloomBoard's pilot through Florida IPDAE. Several of our teachers, including myself, had the opportunity to test drive the program and actually go through the micro-credentialing program for distance learning. And so we had 5, in addition to myself, instructors in our program that I wanted to jump in. First of all, why did I jump in, right? We jumped in because, first of all, it's free. Okay, so we want to test drive it. We want to have a say in how this is going to be shaped, and we wanted to have a firsthand, we haven't tried something like this in adult education. To me, as an administrator, my biggest challenge is ensuring consistency, especially when we moved on to the COVID months, where everybody has to learn how to do virtual instruction in like 5 minutes, right? We had to roll out professional development in stages. It was a big chaos. We've lost a lot of students because of the quick transition. Now that we're in the middle or towards the end, hopefully towards the end of the COVID months, my challenge now is making sure that everybody is consistent, because part of us is going to continue with virtual learning and distance learning. So we want to make sure that every student, regardless which teacher they have, will have a consistent level of quality and level of instruction for their teachers. So we need to set the bar as what is to the expectation here. And so I signed up our teachers in this, and we wanted to see how it looks. We want to know how rigorous the work is. And I would say that it is very rigorous. I myself went through national board certification, and so I am very familiar with micro-credential and micro-endorsements. So in that particular event for myself, I found even though becoming a national board certified teacher is a tough process, there is so much learning that I've gained, and it really became a cornerstone of me being an effective educator, across the board. So it was a very important moment to me, and I want my teachers to experience the same thing, because research shows that it's going to get into and translate into better results. So that's our experience. We had 5 teachers who went through the blended learning arc, which is very, very important as to planning what they're supposed to learn, and addressing that digital literacy gap. So how do teachers do that? Because I need everybody to be consistent, whether they live in Plant City or they live right in the middle of downtown. I also want to make sure that my teachers are building relationship, which is the difficult part in blended learning or digital instruction, is that relationship. You don't have a human touch. Students are seeing my teachers through a computer. Are these teachers addressing the needs of the students and building those important relationships, even if they are in virtual setting? And last but not the least is the norms. We want to make sure that is consistent across, that no student is left at a disadvantage because the teacher is inexperienced in digital teaching, or a teacher has higher expectations in digital learning over another. Eventually, all of these students are going to take the same test at the end. They're going to take the CASAS test, the TABE test, and the GED test. So really, we want to make sure that it is consistent, whether or not they're coming in face-to-face or in person. And talking about face-to-face, even if we do open up back to face-to-face instruction, all of the learning that my teachers have gained through the micro-endorsement courses that they took can still be applied in an in-person basis. And so it really translates throughout, and it just gives my teachers a little bit of an advantage and a little bit more of a standard on what quality instruction looks like. And the good thing is like, yes, this is an autopilot because it's virtual. It has all the bells and whistles and supports that we need just in case my teachers falls off the cliff and could not complete a particular artifact because they didn't understand it. So that's just my feedback with Hillsborough County Public Schools. If you have not considered thinking about this, but if you're moving into digital instruction or continuing with your blended learning, I strongly encourage you to at least give it a try and look through the materials from BloomBoard. With that said, I'm going to turn it back to you, Callie.
I appreciate it. I am going to ask you one more question. I'm the question after. So as you were going through this process and you talked about there were supports, like what were some of the specific supports that you all received that you found most valuable?
The most valuable part for us was the ongoing BLCs, or what we call learning, PLCs, professional learning communities. It's very regular. It happens every Monday. It only happens for an hour, but the attendance in those BLCs not 100% required. I get to see what the agenda looks like, and I can pick and choose which PLC meetings I wanted to attend, because as an administrator, I have very, very limited time. The rest of it I can crunch through the digital platform. But I feel the need that if I need to brush my knowledge on certain things, or I need additional materials, that there is that coach standing by in these BLCs happening regularly, that I can just chime in, go in for about 10 to 20 minutes, get what I need, the information that I need, and get the feedback I need, so I can continue. So that to me is very valuable, and also valuable for my teachers.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. And then the other thing I would ask you is, were there particular artifacts? I know you gave a really great highlight about what was sort of the content of the 3 micro credentials you completed in that micro endorsement. Were there particular artifacts that were impactful? I know you said this was very timely given, COVID and the constraints. Was there something that was an artifact that you thought was most impactful for you and the folks that were going through the pilot?
Yes. So I am going to talk about one particular artifact, which is the video introduction to the student as a way to bridge and build the relationship digitally. So it might be a small thing. It's a small, yeah, what's up with that? What is it? It's an introduction, you know. But that's so important, because especially in an open enrollment setting, how do teachers introduce themselves to the student? Or do they just go in and slide the student in and expect that student to go ahead and start interacting with everybody else digitally, without any welcome, or any just that initiation stage and building the relationship with that student? And that's when we lose them, especially in the virtual setting, is that the students feel like, oh, well, I can do this with just watching the recording. Why do I have to be here in person? You know what I'm saying? That's when we lose the students and say, well, I could learn the same stuff watching through like 7-minute videos on YouTube. Why do I need to go and listen to these teachers and sign up for this class? The relationship is the difference. Yeah. And that's what sets it apart. So I think that's what's very important for us. And my teachers have done elaborate video introductions with a little bit of a biography, pictures from their life, their former students, achievements in class. It's just, they went all out in their video introduction. So that to me was super, super solid.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think sometimes we don't always translate what we know works for younger students to what we know, like to how we address our adult students. And so I appreciate you highlighting the importance of that. Before I pass it over to Kristen, who's going to chat with you a little bit about the grant opportunities and how we at BloomBoard can help, there are a couple of questions in the Q&A panel I want to address. The first, one of them is like, what are the technical skills required for teachers to operate BloomBoard? If you can navigate to a website, we're finding that most teachers can get in and navigate the actual BloomBoard platform. It's, as you saw, it's pretty intuitive. It steps you through what parts to go. And the BLCs also, when we have teachers that might lack technical skills, that one-on-one coach is super helpful. BloomBoard also has state-of-the-art like support staff that get back to folks. Their return time and their customer service scores are amazing. They walk people through. I think where we have people that struggle a little bit if they're not savvy, we do have videos that you need to upload, classroom videos in some micro credentials that demonstrate like your the evidence of your practice with kids. And we see people sometimes get stuck there, but we have a ton of support articles. We support some of those technical skills that might not be super intuitive for everyone. We also have office hours for our coaches. And I think that's where they spend a lot of time helping people who might not be super comfortable with technology, but the technical skill bar isn't super high. Other question in the Q&A was, should administrators go through this process before requiring teachers? So
Ellie, I think I can answer this one.
yeah, I would love for you to, Ron, because I have a bias here.
So
yeah.
I think that for me, it is very advisable for an administrator to go through the process so that you know what you're expecting your teachers to do before you actually expect them. It's important because you need to know how much effort and time is needed in the process. You know, some activities and some artifacts require a little bit of work, and it does require time to hibernate before it can actually manifest itself. Now, if you have very limited time for as an administrator to devote on just looking into this, what I would suggest is look into the outline of the course and you know, just look into like, what are the activities, what are the artifacts that are going to be provided, so that you at least have a clue. And that in itself to you would be very eye-opening, because these are going to require them a specific set of objectives to accomplish. And that to me was super important.
I really appreciate that, and that your dedication as a leader to go through these is amazing. And it is very important that you're able to support your teachers speak the same language they're speaking, the work that they're doing. With any client the BloomBoard works with, you have a team assigned to you as part of our customer success team. You have a senior learning strategist, which is typically someone who has been a principal, superintendent, worked at the district level, that can kind of guide you through from a pedagogy side, sort of thinking, you know, about what this means, how does it align with your vision for your district, what are kind of the messages and ongoing communication that you need with your teacher. You also get a program manager that kind of helps you see milestones along the way, see how your teachers are progressing, help, you know, supportive interventions if folks aren't getting things done. And so there are a lot of, and they can walk you through that outline and through the micro credentials and kind of give you an idea of what that portfolio of evidence is. And so it's super important for you all to think through that. I'm going to hand you over to Kristen to talk through how BloomBoard can help you in the AEFLA grant writing process. This is going to be the heavy part. And so, Kristen, I'm glad you're doing it. But there's a lot of really good information here that will help you determine whether this grant writing process is for you and the kinds of supports that you'll get.
Good afternoon. This is Kristen Udvari. I am the Director of Proposals and Legal Affairs for BloomBoard, and I help a lot of folks with these types of grants when they're interested in obtaining grant funding in order to use our products and services. The AEFLA grant aims to award funding for a 2-year period. It's identified as a transitional period to fund workforce development and adult education programs on a regional level. And the grant details, there's a central webpage, which we provided a link to here, and that has everything you need to know about the grant, including this implementation guide. There's also a link here. That is a great place to start. It walks through what the grant is, what you need to do in order to apply and even to qualify to apply, and those types of details. Also on that main grant homepage are links to a series of webinars and support sessions that will be held in order to walk you through the process of understanding the grant requirements and applying. We also saved a number of the key documents from that website in a Google Docs file, which we're happy to share with you. It's just another way of aggregating some of the documents that you would be using if you were going to apply. That includes the RFP itself, the Excel workbook, these sets of Q&As that have been answered so far. Key dates for this, if you are thinking of applying for the AEFLA grants, are coming up June 11th. 2 things need to happen by June 11th. One is you submit a notice of intent to apply via an online survey. It looks like that link may have dropped out, but there is a SurveyMonkey link that is available on the main grants homepage. And it asks you for some basic information about your organization and then also the main contact person who will be given authorization to a sharing file, a doc sharing file. And then that also gives the FDLE an idea of who's applying, in what regions, how many to expect, and so on. On that same day, on June 11th, that's also the deadline for submitting questions. Questions are due via email to Mallory Martinez, and her email address is provided on the grant competition homepage as well. If you do have questions about some of the things that we talk about today, I would definitely encourage you to submit more questions to Mallory. There's a couple of things I'll reference in a minute that I haven't seen addressed in great detail in the FAQs yet. There are 3 FAQs that are posted now, and then that will be updated more. So I would encourage you to take advantage of that. And then finally, the most important deadline is the final filing deadline, which is June 30th before midnight. And that is an electronic filing via email. And that email address is also available on the grant competition homepage. Kelly, you can advance. So eligibility, who is eligible to apply? There is a list of about, I guess it's 7 different types of entities here that are eligible to apply for these grant funds. But perhaps most importantly, if you qualify as one of those entities, you're not automatically eligible. You also have to provide data showing demonstrative effectiveness in providing adult education and literacy activities. And that data will be entered into a spreadsheet. One of the main application materials is an Excel spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet has many, many tabs. You have to scroll over to the left and the right to make sure you're seeing all of the tabs. And the first couple of tabs are the demonstrated effectiveness tabs. And you click on those tabs, and depending upon whether you are currently funded or you have not been previously funded under the AEFLA program, you choose one of those tabs to enter your data. And the data has to be entered for 2 years. So for the 2018-19 school year and also the 2019-20. And it's performance data on your record in improving the literacy skills of eligible individuals in the domains of reading, writing, math, ELA, and other subjects relevant to the grant application. And there's different categories. So it might be information on the number of eligible individuals who earned a diploma, how many individuals enrolled, how many individuals achieved a specific outcome, such as transition to employment, et cetera, depending on, again, just the nature of your program. What's important about this is that this is a prerequisite to them even reading your application. So if you do not submit sufficient evidence of demonstrated effectiveness, the application will not even be read. They will look at that first, and then they will throw out those who don't fill in that information. So it's very important to start there. And this is one area where I think if you have questions, if you look at that Excel spreadsheet and you look at the tabs, I think there are tabs 2 and 3, and you're just unsure about what would be sufficient data or the type of data to provide, I would really try to delve into that in the questions submitted by June 11th. And I think that could help parse that out for you. Next slide. So then, assuming that you believe that you are eligible and that you have evidence of demonstrated effectiveness, then you get to delve into this lovely grant document. And the documents really consist of 2 main documents. There's the RFP itself, which has all of the criteria that you will have to address in your narrative. And you pull all of those criteria out, put them in a Word document, and address them for your program. We actually did pull all those criteria out and put them in a Word document and upload it to Google Drive, which we're happy to share with you. It has the right margins, which are 1 inch on all sides, the right font size and type, et cetera. We included the application checklist at the end of the document, which is also a requirement. So happy to share that just as a template to get you started. And then the second document that you'll be using is that Excel application worksheet that I mentioned that has a number of tabs, both on the demonstrated effectiveness, your program offering summary, your IET offering summary. So there's a lot of information that will need to be filled in there and uploaded on that final day. You would be applying for the Consolidated Adult General Education Grant. There are 2 funding streams. You can apply under one or either or both. That is your choice depending on the nature of your program. And it's just really important as you're going through it to pay close attention to the application checklist and make sure that you're really focusing on all of the nitty-gritty details, for example, about your narrative, your page limits, they can only be 30 or 40 pages depending upon which funding streams you're applying under. And so you may decide that some of the criteria, the verbatim criteria that we've included in the Google Doc, that you want to cut those and just put your responses in there in order to be able to maintain your page limits. Because when you're dealing with double spacing in 30 pages, you get there pretty quickly, actually. And we are happy to help with that type of information too, but it is spelled out very clearly in the RFP. So just make sure you're looking at that as you're working through it. Next slide.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I don't know where it went.
And I can keep talking while you're looking for it.
Can you not see it? Can you guys not see the?
Oh, we can see it. It's only half of the screen, Kelly.
I'm sorry, you guys. So give me 1 second. For whatever reason. There we go. Let's try it.
There we go. And I'm on, I believe, slide 24.
Thank you.
Actually, 25. You were correct. We have an extra one in there. Okay. So the narrative template that I referenced in Google Drive, we're happy to share that with you. And what we're also happy to do is to help insert text regarding how our programs might fit into your broader adult education and workforce development program that you are proposing under this grant. So everything that Kelly talked about earlier and Ron, that type of work could be funded and could help to provide the professional development and workforce training components of your overall program. So we can provide text, we can help thread that throughout your broader narrative, and we can help fill out some of those forms as well, where they're asking you to detail the nature of the program, the cost of the program, et cetera. Go back one more time, Kelly, to that. Yeah, there we go.
For whatever reason, it won't allow me to put it in presentation mode, Kristen, so I apologize.
That's okay. One other thing to note that is, when you're doing your narrative, you'll see that the very first component of your narrative under priority 1 really has to do with regional partnerships and with your partnership with the local workforce development board. You have to complete an executive summary form and detail how your plan will align with your services and contribute to the local development board's goals as identified in their plan. You also are asked to execute an MOU if you can with your local workforce development board and any other local entities that you're going to partner with on this. While the MOU itself is not absolutely required in order to be reviewed and approved, I would think that it certainly makes your application that much stronger. It's important to recognize that the workforce development boards will be reviewing the applications that are submitted and making recommendations to FLDOE on whether the grant should be funded or not. So more coordination and more documentation of that coordination with respect to the local workforce development board will put you in a better position in order to obtain funding, and certainly also get their feedback on how you can best serve the needs of the region. Next slide. Some examples of where we can provide text for your narrative if you are interested in incorporating our programs into your program starts at the very beginning, of course, with the abstract. While the abstract itself is not scored, it's not worth points, it is important to set the stage for what you're proposing. We can provide basic text describing how the micro endorsement program fits into your overall plan to provide adult education and literacy activities to address the training needs of eligible individuals in your county, particularly those in the categories that have been identified. Moving on to priority 2, and the only reason I skip priority 1 is that priority 1 really focuses on the partnerships, so the regional partnerships with the local workforce development board and others. There are likely components of your response there where it will make sense to reference your use of BloomBoard programs and activities, but the real focus of priority 1 will be your regional partnerships. But priority 2 has several parts that relate directly to the type of work that we do and that we can do with you under this program. For example, We can provide text describing how our micro endorsements qualify as credentials of value, a term used in the RFP itself, how they'll function as work-based learning opportunities within your IET program. And those are specific criteria from the RFP. There is an IET program study template that it's a form that must be submitted to describe how you will develop and implement IET service approaches. We can help you complete the tables to show how our component of your IET program, how it fits into there and how it aligns to the relevant frameworks and standards, specific learning objectives, et cetera. I think that the implementation guide has a particularly useful section on IET guidance. It has IET models. It talks about the best way to describe your IET. So I definitely encourage you to look at that. Next slide, Kelly. Still in priority 2, part F, we can talk about how your overall approach will be aligned to credentials of value. Again, that same term, such as industry, certificates, and certification, the types of credentials available to students and learners who participate in this service approach. Again, those would be the micro credentials and the micro endorsements, which are the sets of micro credentials that Kelly referenced earlier, and then the nature of the supports around those micro endorsement programs. Under priority 3, we can address multiple parts here, which I think we may have ended up duplicating them on this bullet point, but basically parts G, H, and I, so quality program offerings, technology and online learning, instructional personnel, and professional development. Those are all very relevant to what we can provide for your program, and we can provide the text that explains the nature of those program offerings, the research underlying them, some of the effectiveness data that Kelly mentioned, and how the method of delivery, how it's delivered online and also supported online with our online coaching, our expert facilitation, and our expert micro-credential assessment tools. There is a program offering summary form, yet another form that you must address and attach, and then that's specifically referenced by criterion G3. So as you're filling that out, we can provide some details to put in that form. Under priority 4, that is your evaluation priority. And while there will be a much broader evaluation of your program, we, BloomBoard, have tools that we offer our organizations, our partner organizations, to help them monitor their learners' engagement in our programs. And those are built into our platform, and they allow you to see how are the participants within your cohort, how are they progressing in your program? Which micro-credentials are they engaged in? How are they moving along? How many micro-credentials have they earned at a certain point in time? How many micro-credentials did they earn overall? So it gives you a lot of good engagement and completion data that you can use to show positive engagement, fidelity of implementation, and ultimately effectiveness of the program. And we're happy to both describe the nature of those tools and then also to provide that data to you throughout the course of your 2-year program.
Thanks, Kristen. Just to be clear, like the offerings that we're talking about fit squarely into the details of this grant, and you can see we'll provide you a lot of support. If you choose, you can choose to engage with BloomBoard too outside of like the grant details. So, Kristen, should they be contacting Randy if they have interest?
Yeah, I think Randy's probably a good point person for that, and then he can determine, because Randy can certainly help you engage, even if you're not interested in engaging via this grant process, but would like to do a smaller pilot through other means. But then if you do or are pursuing the EFLA grant and you would like our help on that, he will connect you to me.
Yeah, can we do and share that info in the chat? And while you're doing that, there's going to be a feedback that's going to pop up on your screen right now. But I'm just going to start saying also that, you know, even though this is a competitive grant, I would really, if you're thinking about components for your G, H, and I sections, you know, professional development, quality program offerings, instructional practices, that's where BloomBoard can come in and really complement that. Of course, whatever the results are in those sections, those will definitely drive the success of priority 2. So these are all interconnected throughout. And so, you know, I find great use. I am not speaking for Hillsborough County Public Schools, but I'm speaking as a grant writer, that how BloomBoard is structured fits squarely, just like what Kelly said, fits squarely into the RFP, like they're thinking along the same line. So that's kind of like my last few words here while you're completing your evaluation. Kelly, do you have any other additions?
I don't. Just thank you so much for your time and attention today. And we hope that we can support you in moving forward with this work.
Well, thank you, Kelly, Kristen, and Ron. We really appreciate you doing that webinar for us today. I want to remind all of you that our next webinar will be on June 2nd. And the title for that webinar is Building a Career Pathway for Adult Education. So I know you're not going to want to miss that. I want to wish all of you a very happy and healthy Memorial Day weekend. Take care and get some rest, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you again.